In problem 6, we're going to use the aggregate market model 2 Excel simulation. We're going to download this and then open it up to complete problem 6. The reason why that is because we have many more assumptions to insert. So consumer wealth here is $9.11 trillion, expected future income is 8.4, yada yada yada. NPC is 0.75, the NPM is 0.25. And these aggregate demand parameters have already been populated in this Excel simulation here. We've done the same thing with the long-run production factors and the short-run production factors. And we've also copied the slope into the Excel spreadsheet as well. So the slope is 0.85. Here are the short-run production factors, and here are the long-run production factors. So the initial equilibrium price level is 15.29120. To 3 decimal places is 15.291. The initial GDP level is 11.14259. Since the fourth digit is a 5, I got to make the 2 a 3. Potential GDP is 16.8. Short and aggregate supplies intercept is 5.820. Aggregate demand's intercept is 20.863. And aggregate demand's slope is 0.500. The gap between the equilibrium level of GDP and potential is the difference between real GDP initial, $11.143 trillion, minus potential GDP, 16.800. I'm going to copy this into Excel to compute it. If I use 3-digit decimal accuracy in the intermediate step, I get a gap of negative 5.657. If I use 5-digit decimal accuracy, I get the same thing. So we're safe. So the output gap implies there is a recessionary gap. So this is the diagram that you saw in Excel. This is aggregate demand, AD, short run aggregate supply, SRAS, and then long run aggregate supply. And GDP is far to the left of potential GDP. So the economy here is in a recessionary gap. The unemployment rate is going to be high, which means it exceeds the natural rate of unemployment when we're in a recessionary gap. To fix the situation, the Congress President typically proposed legislation that cuts taxes and or raises government expenditure. Now, while the senators and congresspersons debate the appropriate course of action, maybe something like firm investment expenditures rise. Maybe they rise by $3.81875 trillion. If that's the case, then aggregate demand will shift from this black curve to this blue curve. And then we're going to copy this into Word and label it completely. This is 81. This is 82. Short run aggregate supply, long run aggregate supply, PL, Y, The units of real GDP are in trillions of dollars. The units at the price level are in thousands of dollars. Next, suppose, as the minority party in the Senate filibusters the majority party's legislation, expected future income has risen by $3.81875 trillion. The diagram below shows how this and the improvement in the business investment expenditure affect the economy. So the improvement in business investment expenditure pushes aggregate demand here. The improvement in expected future income pushes the economy to this point. So this is 81, 82, and 83. Short aggregate supply, long run aggregate supply, price level in thousands of dollars, real GDP in trillions of dollars. The green equation here is the aggregate demand model after the improvement in expected future income and business investment. So we need to calculate the new equilibrium. Well, at this new aggregate demand level, real GDP and potential GDP are equal. The gap has been closed without any government action. So this value here is final GDP after the improvement in expected future income and business investment. This value is equal to potential, so the output gap is 0. And potential GDP was 16.800. To get the price level, we need to plug this value into this equation. Or we can simply copy this value here, the increase in firm investment expenditures, which is equal to the increase in future expected income. We can copy this value into the simulation. So business investment expenditures increased $3.81875 trillion. And expected future income increased by the same value. So the price level after the improvement in business expenditures and the improvement in expected future income pushes the price level up to $20.1000, thousands of dollars. With the gap closed, the legislation moves forward in the House and Senate after the majority party agrees to include some of the minority party's proposals. So now that the Senate and House approve of the amended House bill, fiscal stimulus is injected into the economy with a tax cut of $0.9 trillion. The diagram down here shows how that affects the economy. The economy, which didn't need stimulus because the gap had closed, is now in an inflationary gap. The red aggregate demand curve is the result of the tax cut of $0.9 trillion that hits American taxpayers. The equation that corresponds to the red aggregate demand curve is the red equation down here. So now we need to calculate the equilibrium, this inflationary gap that is induced by the tax cut. So we're going to copy the tax cut of $0.9 trillion into the simulation. Because as a tax cut, we have to subtract it from the initial level of tax revenue. And you can see aggregate demand shifted outward into an inflationary gap. The new price level is 20.525. The new level GDP is 17.30. The output gap is the difference between GDP and potential GDP. Potential GDP was 16.8. I'm going to compute this in Excel. So the new output gap is a positive 0.5. Now, in the second part of that stimulus bill that Congress enacted above, fiscal policy is used to close the initial output gap here with an increase in government expenditure of $0.9 trillion. That pushes the economy out even further. So the inflationary gap was made even worse by the increase in government expenditure. This purple equation is the aggregate demand curve that corresponds to the purple aggregate demand curve here. And in order to calculate the equilibrium that results from both the tax cut and the increase in government expenditure, we're going to add $0.9 trillion to government expenditure. So GDP gets pushed out to 17.96667 to 3 decimal places. That would be 17.967. The price level is 20.09167. Because that number there is 5 or bigger, the 1 has to become a 2. The output gap is the difference between what GDP is and potential. So GDP is now 17.967 and potential is 16.8. So the gap now is $1.167 trillion. So the lag in fiscal policy creates a huge inflationary gap of $1.167 trillion. The unemployment rate is low. What do I mean by low? The unemployment rate is less than the natural rate of unemployment. So when the unemployment rate is really, really low, firms have a hard time manning their production processes. So they either pay their workers overtime wages, or they try to hire workers away from other firms by offering better wages and benefits. So wages are going to rise. Also, factories are running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So energy prices start to rise. So the prices of other production inputs increases as well. The economy is now in an inflationary gap. The unemployment rate now is less than the natural rate of unemployment. If Congress and the President do not reverse the legislation, and the Fed is late to act, nominal prices of labor and other production inputs will rise. This results in the following aggregate supply curve, which is in pink. So we go from the inflationary gap that was caused by the delayed effect of government spending and tax cuts. We go from the inflationary gap that induced to a point here on the longer aggregate supply curve that results from wages and prices of other production inputs causing short aggregate supply to shift upward along the longer aggregate supply. At this new equilibrium, real GDP, Y subscript E, equals potential GDP, which was $16.8 trillion. To get the equilibrium price level at this new equilibrium, we have to plug this value into this new short aggregate supply curve. In the spreadsheet, I've changed the wage from 3.2 to 4.38 and the price of other production inputs from 1 to 1.4. That gives me a new intercept of 7.395, which was the value of the pink short and aggregate supply curves intercept. The price level is 21.675. The output gap is 0. In part F, I want to calculate the economic growth rate and the inflation rate that corresponds to the equilibrium in part B and the equilibrium in part E. The equilibrium in part B was the equilibrium that resulted when government did nothing, or before it could do something. I've copied these numbers into Excel. These numbers represent the equilibrium for part B. The equilibrium in part E results when wages and prices rise after the lagged fiscal policy, a tax cut, and an increase in government expenditure push the economy into an inflationary gap at this point right here. These numbers here are copied and pasted into Excel here. The economic growth rate is the percent change in GDP at point E and GDP at point B. So this is what GDP is at point E, and this is what GDP was at point B. We're going to multiply that by 100. So we get 0 economic growth from the fiscal policy. We do get a dose of inflation. 7.836% inflation. So the unnecessary and poorly timed fiscal policy increases the budget deficit by $1.8 trillion. Why? The tax cut was $0.9 trillion. The increase in government expenditure was $0.9 trillion. I'm going to check my work and I should get everything correct. And we get everything correct.